Hi, everybody. Stuart Stevens on this Friday. I wrote a piece this week for Lincoln Square that I've been meaning to write for a long time. That was called Scott Galloway is Wrong About Everything. You can put it up there, Sam, if you can. Now, it's sort of an odd piece for me to write because, in fact, I kind of love Scott Galloway and listen to him all the time on his, multiple podcasts. The guy has more podcasts than I think any other human on the planet. And he's a brilliant guy and a very interesting guy who shows a lot of personal vulnerability when he talks about the world, which I find interesting and admirable. Somewhat weird, but he does it. But he has two things that are call them themes of his, in which he just could not be more wrong. So let's talk about them. One is this idea that at this moment in time, it is uniquely terrible and challenging and difficult to be a young American male. Now, he wrote a book about it, and I know Scott Galloway is not the only person who says this. So I'm not just speaking to Scott Galloway, I'm speaking to this idea. And it's a nutty idea. For this to be a particularly difficult, uniquely challenging time for young males, it kind of begs the question of when was it better to be a young male in America? So say, okay, it's obviously not better to have been born in the 1800s because the odds were you're only going to live to about 45, which sort of sucks. So let's say the 20th century. Born in 1900, great, just in time to go get killed in France and have the Spanish flu. You can cough out your lungs in your basement from mustard gas and the Spanish flu. But, at least you're not in your mom's basement vaping, which seems to be one of the horrors that is held up as an example of how terrible it is to be a young male today. So go through any decade. You want to be born in 1920? Great, just in time to get killed in World War II. Play it out. When was it better? And 80s, when we had huge recession. 90s, we had another recession. But it's sort of two things, or three things that are really troubling about this. One, what Scott Galloway is talking about are American middle-class white males. Because is anybody really seriously going to say that this is a uniquely difficult time to be a young black male? Really? You think so? I don't think so. And what about being a young gay male? I suppose now you're burdened with the difficulties of being able to marry someone you love. But you want to go back to the 50s, 60s? Are you losing your job because you're gay? 70s, even when? So we're talking about this very narrow slice, which shockingly are people like Scott Galloway. So it's not just the economic crisis that they say these young males are having to deal with the burden of being born in the wealthiest society in the history of the world. It's this other thing out there called women. And what's interesting about this is the way the left and the right kind of meet. So the right has this whole thing about how terrible it is to be a young male because the decline of the traditional role of the male, which is to say basically that women won't do what you say. On the left, it's more kind of with Scott Galloway, who isn't really left, but he's not right. It's more like, oh, there's all this, people they aren't going out drinking a lot. They aren't going out and having sex with strangers as much. And I don't know. I don't really know if it's a huge crisis that like young men are getting drunk less in public. This is a crisis. If that's the case, let's do away with the drinking age and the fact that they're not having enough. Let's just, do away with contraception. I mean, fine. They're not having enough kids. Fine. Let's do it. It's a nutty idea and a self-indulgent idea. And it's really a variation of Donald Trump's Make America Great Again, because the premise of that is there was a time when America was greater. So when was that? 50s, maybe? 60s? I miss Mad Men? Don't think so. It's nostalgic in sort of a dumb way. I mean, nostalgia is great for like niche playlist, but as a way to view the world and as a social theory, it really doesn't work. I mean, if you're a young male, sure, it is difficult. But when was it easy? And what are the advantages you have? You can sit your ass down in a Starbucks and start a company. You can start your own YouTube channel, make millions of dollars if you're lucky. You can self-publish a novel that could find a large audience because of what it has. You can invent a new business. You have more opportunity than any other time in history. So really, do we miss the days of you're going to grow up and go to work in the steel mill or but at least, when you come home, the little woman will have a meal waiting for you and you'll know that you're a man. I don't know. It's really, really not only wrong, I think it's a harmful idea. Okay. So there we are. Scott Galloway, wrong about everything. Let's move on to the second idea that Scott Galloway is sort of obsessed with, and that is the branding of the Democratic Party. Now, Scott Galloway, when it comes to business, is sort of a branding genius, and he's been extraordinarily successful. But he doesn't understand political branding at all, and he doesn't understand the differences. And one of Scott's premises of successful branding is you should be able to brand your company, your organization, or yourself in a way that is not dependent upon the definition of anyone else. And he uses the Tiffany Blue Box as an example, which is a brilliant piece of marketing. But where it falls down is in politics, it's a zero-sum choice. You don't care how many votes you get, your candidate gets. If you're running for president and you get 20,000 votes and your opponent gets 15,000, hallelujah, you won. That's all that matters. If you're Dell, you can be wildly successful, while Apple is wildly successful. The two are not zero-sum. But in politics, it's a binary choice more often than not. Years ago, I was asked by Ad Age, as a political guy, what would I do if I was hired by McDonald's to run a campaign against Burger King? I said, well, it's easy. Don't eat at Burger King. It kills you. It works. And what's the sort of test proof of how wrong Scott Galloway is? Politics is the only business in America that I know of, major billion-dollar plus business, that never has a recession. Every year we spend more money on politics, billions and billions and billions of dollars, increasingly. So we have these extraordinarily creative, brilliant commercial advertising agencies, commercial advertising minds, the people who brought us Nike, Apple, Google, brilliant people, the people who brought us IKEA. Why is it that none of them can break into political advertising and access these billions of dollars that are being spent? And believe me, they've tried. I've watched them try. It's because it's just a different game. It's a different process of selection. If you're working for Tiffany's and there's only Zayres, yeah, you're Tiffany's, you're taxpayers. Like, if you really loved her, why'd you buy it at the mall? It would work like a charm. But that's not how the commercial world is. And all this obsession, the Democrats have to build up their own little Tiffany Blue Box campaign or image. No. Donald Trump got elected president of the United States, in case you haven't heard, in 24, and did not run one positive ad. Not one. I don't think that's ever been done before in the history of politics for a successful campaign. He didn't even try to get you to like you. All he did was try to disqualify Harris. So the Harris campaign, which I think was a very good campaign. I think she's a very good candidate. They're really the best of the best were running that campaign. I know, I've gone up against them. They beat me. They tried to have a very traditional campaign in a very shortened length of time. They kind of were going to go through the stations of cross of a candidacy, introduce her on a personal level, introduce her on a policy level. Then they were going to go about defining Donald Trump. Then I don't know. I think they probably would have been better off if they had gotten to defining Donald Trump a lot sooner. And, the problem with the Democratic Party is the Democratic Party talks about the fucking Democratic Party too much. Nobody cares about parties. They care about candidates. They care about themselves. It's why independents are the fastest growing party in America. I'm sitting in Santa Monica right now, and the no party preference independents will bounce up and down and be the second largest party in California. And a perfect example is look at the New Jersey governor's race and the Virginia governor's race, where Democratic candidates won the last race 10 plus points. In states where I've helped elect Republican governors, these are not super blue lefty states. And the Democratic Party image sort of sucked, but they still won by over 10 points because they were better than the opposition. And the passion that is driving politics at the moment is, are you for Donald Trump or you're not for Donald Trump? So don't run against that. Embrace it. And tie every candidate that you have out there, every Republican, to Donald Trump. You think any of these people are going to be asking Donald Trump to come campaign for him in swing districts? I don't think so. Hey, Donald Trump is going to come to my swing district and he's going to talk about the Epstein files and he's going to talk about the Iran war and say there's a golden age and that everybody's really flourishing. How's that going to work out, guys? So attack, attack, attack. I understand that's not how you build a great commercial brand, but it's how you win political campaigns. So here ends my little TED talk on Scott Galloway, who, again, I will say is brilliant. And later today, I'll listen to one of his podcasts and I'll learn something and appreciate it. But on these two ideas, he's really wrong. Thanks. Talk to you later.